All right, we're going to be discussing the mechanics from a front view, and we're just going to concern ourselves with our path or the flow down the mound. So we already got these videos to the top of these guys' leg lifts. Obviously, every pitcher comes down the mound at different rates, different speeds. However, to make these guys flow together, I have changed up their speeds to fit. So what we're going to see is that we got Jerry Jones over here getting that front leg fully extended and really sitting into his delivery. We got Greinke, who's got his knee, which is going to be further back towards second base than his foot is. He's really taking this front knee and kind of curling it back so that his front hip stays closed. And Kirby is going like Jones here with his front leg, but he's keeping it in a more bent position rather than kicking it straight out like Jones. But what we do notice is no matter how these guys load into their back hips, getting down into their legs, engaging their lower halves, what do we notice? We notice where the glove is going. And that's to help them be able to see over their front shoulder. They want to be looking down the barrel of their shoulder, because the longer we can be looking here over this shoulder as we proceed down the mound. Obviously, we've gotten back to center, but look, we're still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that front shoulder. The longer we can do that into our moment of foot strike, bam, bam, we can see front shoulder, and our head is still trying to fight to keep that front, or rather our front shoulder is still fighting to stay above our chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. And when we do that, we can see that the back hip now has been able to come through, exposing the belt buckle to the batter, to our catcher, but preventing, because that front shoulder's fought to stay in so that we continue to look over it. Look what that's done with our chest. It's kept it squared up, squared up, squared up, as that lower half has been able to fire, and there lies our upper lower half separation that we're trying to achieve. And now here comes the most important part. Getting into this position is key for both our power production, our ability to throw the baseball with our body, thus reducing the amount of stress that's going on through our arm during that delivery, and helping ensure, this wasn't the straightest line here, helping ensure our energy continues to flow to the catcher. All right, we can see that head staying there, that head staying there. Kirby's fighting to keep it in there. And you can see he's fighting to keep it in there because it did not go more out there. So we're rotating that back shoulder. We're rotating that back shoulder forward. forward, forward, forward. So that way all of our power can be flung through those fingers, out through that ball, forward. If we watch that again without any interruption, into foot strike, out of foot strike. Everything staying in line with our target. And then noticing as they're getting into release, where are those chin and chests going? To the target. To the target. The angle of our trunk, this mass from our shoulders through our waist, our trunk right now is upright. It's above our hips. In relation to the ground, it's in a 90-degree angle. As we get into release, those trunks in relation to the ground are no longer up here trying to throw the baseball. Instead, in relation to the ground, these trunks of these elite throwers of the baseball, both in terms of command, the best to ever do it, in terms of longevity and success, one of the best to do it, and an upcomer with elite velocity and potential to be an all-star. Every one of their trunks at release went from being up here at foot strike to out here at release, bringing that energy down the mound, but most importantly, towards our target. And that's something that we're able to see even easier and more clearly in the side view videos. All right, so if we kind of take this back once more and we see these arm slots, we'd say, boom. Oops, let me draw a better line than that. Right, we're at a high three-quarter, three-quarter. We are in a same thing, three-quarter, high three-quarter. Same thing here, right? So these are some of your most common arm slots are the three-quarter to high three-quarter arm slot. And then what we'll look at next here are some guys that are in that lower three-quarter tier. So we'll let, we got Luis Hill, Kyle Harrison, and Carl Crawford. All right, so the same thing, moment of that foot strike, we can see that they're still fighting to keep that front shoulder in, keep that front shoulder in, fighting to keep that front shoulder in, and then coming to release and through, we can see how those heads are fighting to stay in. Luis Hill a little bit outside, but we can see through release, bam, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. Now it's out, which is no big deal. It's already stable for long enough post-release, bam, that he could do a cartwheel over here if he wanted to after. So fighting to keep that front shoulder in, And by doing that, the shoulders have stayed squared up, and with a good lower half timing and pattern sequencing, we got the back hip to have come forward, exposing that belt buckle to the batter, creating that upper and lower half separation that we're trying to seek in order to achieve higher velocities and minimize the stress that's put on our arm during these high intense and continuous throws. If we then take these guys into their moment of release, we got that same concept that we did earlier, and we can see here's our low 3/4, even getting closer, some would say, to even true sidearm. We have that low 3/4, and we got that 3/4 to low 3/4. But what we can notice is all the same with those different arm slots, but the most common arm slots in our game. All these guys are fitting the same bill in their own unique ways, but these important key points are all very much getting checked off by each, no matter what. All right, so what we're going to be discussing here is the body's position that we get to the moment our front foot gets into the ground for the very first time. And this moment in time is called our foot strike. So we are going to be talking about the moment when, boom, those feet get into the ground for the very first time. And again, that's called our foot strike position. At foot strike, we want to be looking at our body in two halves. Our upper half and our lower half. At foot strike, we want our lower half to have rotated forward towards our target. And a useful thing to look at to know if we've been able to do that is the belt buckle. And is that belt buckle facing the target? If the belt buckle is facing the target, it's a pretty good chance that we have successfully rotated both the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip. When we're able to rotate the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip, as our front foot is getting into that foot strike position, we will successfully be able to get our belt buckle driving towards the target. If we specifically take a look at just the back foot of these four guys, let's watch as they are rotating that back leg, how that back foot is rotating. At this point in time, all four guys still have their entire foot flat onto the ground, and then they begin to rotate through or over top of their big toe. Their foot kind of rolls, folds over, or drives forward. And as the foot does that motion, we now shift our view to the back knee and know as the foot is rolling over the big toe, that the back knee is also rotating forward. And how those two things, the back foot and the back knee, are working together. We can also see that as we go to drive and rotate that back foot and back knee, how they do that while they gain ground down the mound and towards their catcher. So this is the difference between rotating our bodies forward, or a word for that is driving ourselves forward, versus just rotating in place. If we were just rotating in place, our bodies would not be able to gain this ground down the mound. Our bodies wouldn't be able to accelerate our power and energy down the mound. And we can then look and see that the foot has the toe, and then the heel is in front of the toe, meaning we have rotated forward. We then go to the upper body, the upper halves, from the waist up, and we want to separate that upper body from the lower body. We want the direction that our hips are facing, which is to the target, to be separate from the direction our shoulders are facing. So we can see the Giants, the Pirates, and his number. We can see the Phillies, and we can see the Brewers or Milwaukee. I'm not sure what they have displayed on their jerseys there. So the direction of their lower bodies is to the target, and the direction of their shoulders is still facing, for these right-handers, towards third base, or the direction they have been the entire time. So we rotate the lower body first, then we get into foot strike, then we rotate our upper body second. And the more that we can get those lower bodies to fully rotate to the target by the time that front foot hits the ground, and we've also been able to keep that upper body from rotating and staying back, we will have created as much upper lower half separation or hip shoulder separation as possible. And the more hip shoulder separation or upper lower half separation we can create, the more power we're going to be able to produce, and the amount of stress that's put on our arm is going to be reduced. What we're also going to notice is that almost regardless of your arm slot, if we have a true 3/4, low 3/4, high 3/4, an over-the-top arm slot, or anything in between those, we're always going to find ourselves in a relatively 90 degree angle, meaning from our elbow across to our other shoulder, we want to think is nice and even. 90 degrees in that armpit. We also want to think 90 degrees in that elbow. We want this type of arm position, that 90-90, we'll call it, at the moment of foot strike. When our arm has loaded up to this position here, at the moment of foot strike, and the upper body has not rotated yet, our body's rotation will accelerate the throw forward. If the arm is not in this 90-90 position, the body's rotation forward is going to be less than ideal and in sync with how the arm will flow after the body goes. So we're looking for this 90-90-ish position in that throwing arm at foot strike. What we can also notice at foot strike is, where is this glove at? It's in front of the body by the rib cage. We're not letting it If we're thinking, here's some water, don't drown the glove. Don't let your glove get wet. Don't drown that glove. This one right here is a little too high. Should be more towards the belt. Okay. When the glove gets finished into the body like this, it's able to help keep this front shoulder in line, meaning it's not going to open up early. Because if that front shoulder starts to open up early, that's going to start to pull the back shoulder forward early. And now we would not have separated our upper and lower halves as much because the angle of the shoulders would begin to rotate forward, which would be more matching the angle of the hips. The final thing we're going to look at is this front leg. We see all these guys have different degrees of bend in their front legs. But what we're going to notice is that as the upper body now rotates to throw, we need to make our front leg become a firm fixture of which we can rotate around. So thinking about this front leg here turning into a flagpole. My flagpole is always going to be strongest if it's straight. Or at least I can't have my flagpole move forward while my body is trying to rotate forward. So we'll redraw these little outlines here. And we will have these guys, oh man, that's all right, it's going to get back to it anyway. Boom. And now we'll watch as they go to throw. How that leg is locking out, stiffening up, straightening out. So that now that leg is here, now that leg is here, now that leg is here and here. From the bend, straightening it out. And what we can notice is as that leg locks out, stiffens up, straightens out, becomes that firm flagpole, notice how that upper body is able to catapult itself out in front and down more. Able to get out in front more. Out in front more. So that way, if we look, we can't get everyone exactly at release, but ball just out, ball just out, ball is coming out, ball is slightly a little bit more out than the bottom too. But we're able to look at this angle of the chin to the waist, back out to the front foot, boom, boom, boom. Just how out in front of themselves they're getting. And that's because of that front leg's ability to lock out. So we can see that they're starting, boom, boom, there, and there. So now it's not just the arm throwing the ball down, it's the body throwing the ball down. It's the body going down with the throw, body accelerating down. And as the body's accelerating down, the lower half is firming up. So that way, as I need to finish all this violent rotation, I have the ability to do that around that firm front leg. I have that ability to rotate around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my back leg around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my hips around. I can finish all that violent rotation out of my back shoulder around, giving my arm plenty of time to slow down and giving the back muscles, my scapular muscles, all the time they need to activate and slow down that rapidly accelerating arm. All right, now that you've gotten the opportunity to kind of study and see visually the big league examples of the pitching delivery and kind of how we're looking for our body to flow through those different checkpoints. We're going to play your video 2 times through. First time would be all one motion, so you can see what you look like start to finish from these 2 perspectives. And then the second time the video plays, we will get it so that it pauses at the moment of your front foot getting all the way into the ground. So that way we can compare and contrast what we just saw to what we're seeing with your delivery. All right, so first thing we're going to notice is we go back and we're going to see that your heel is making contact with the ground first, and then we got the foot rolling down the rest of the way, which isn't necessarily an issue to be landing with the heel first and then rolling into the foot. But what we're going to notice is that as that's going down is when you're really getting this backside drive occurring with your foot. And it's really just a like push off sequence that you're doing. You're like springing away from the pitching rubber. So you're trying to like really get this front leg out in front of you. Like it's already straight. Not only is it straight, but it's reaching away from your body already. So you're kicking this front leg out, and then now it's just reaching out even further without your body really going further. And then now that you're like as far as you possibly can get here from one another, you're that reached out, we can't really rotate things very well because we're so stretched out that we kind of just end up springing ourselves, right? We can see that that back knee is trying to rotate. It's trying to rotate, but it's doing a lot of extending. And I think there's just been a lot, maybe in past, for you, been told to like really get down the mound, or we got to like have a big stride. And or maybe this is just how your body wants to be naturally, because we are pretty wide with the hands as well. All right, we are pretty wide here, so being and getting wide here syncs up. But I just feel like with this heel hitting here, and then all of this rolling down, and then this springing at this point in time here, is we're just trying to get as big of a stride as you possibly can. So now, like, once this foot finally gets into the ground, and it's probably still got to go some more. If we go a little bit further, we can see how that toe continues to go more into the ground, right? And that's just like your body's weight still getting into that front leg. That weight's still getting into that front leg, and now it's like secured. We're looking for all of this to get firmed up as soon as we possibly can from once it gets into the ground. So that way we can rotate around and also down a firm front side. So the longer it takes for your front side to get firm, the less we're going to be able to throw on that firmness of that front leg. The sooner the better. So what I would maybe want to think about if I was you is, if you are thinking about trying to get your stride as big as possible, or really get down the mound, to no longer think about that and instead think about getting this foot to go into the ground with violence. Like violently get it to go into the ground. Because if it's violent, it's probably not going to land with this heel, and then we'll lower it into the ground. We'll probably just smack it nice and firm, all flat together, from heel to toe, laying at the same time. And if we think just drive it into the ground, this rotation going into the ground will help that. This rotation of the back hip going down and forward will help that. This back foot turning over and down will help that go down into the ground. But because this is reaching out and these reach out, they all kind of pair and work together with a reach, a reach, a reach. But obviously, as we just saw, when we do pause you at that foot strike, even if it's somewhere in between the heel and what we had paused it at, we can see visually this, and this all look like the big leaguers. We go over to here, and this looks like the big leaguers. This looks like the big leaguers, right? At that moment of foot strike, trying to keep this front shoulder in with this glove being here, just like we saw with the big leaguers. So we're doing things and getting to the checkpoints we want to get to. It's just how we're getting there. If we want to throw with more power and with more energy, we're going to want to rethink how we are getting this leg into the ground. Right now, you're getting it out in front to try to reach as far as you possibly can. We don't need to reach as far as we possibly can. We just need to get it firm and hard into the ground so we can throw all of our body firm and hard down the mound. Outside of that, the one thing I will make note of is with your upper body is we have this arm and this good like flexion in the elbow, but we have this front side that's not mimicking it. It was here, right? We have similar angles working here. We have similar angles working here, but then we lose that angle altogether. We see it went from like a 90 to the less, or to from 90 to more than 90 to 180 with this glove side. But we went from that like, with the backside, that angle got bigger, but it never got so big that it got to 180. It kind of ultimately holds this angle. It holds that angle, and in fact, it gets it more, whereas this gets straight. So we're going to want to try to find a way to get those more in sync with one another, more mirroring one another, not because we need to be equal and opposite, but just because it's going to help us not have this elbow flow so much higher, boom, to get way up here. Because now when we go to get our hand to flip up, we got a lot of elbow going down. A lot of elbow going down at this moment of the hand loading up. And we also get into this tight angle here. So I want to try to avoid this tight angle, right? Because we're thinking more of a 90-90, 90 degrees in the elbow, 90 degrees in the armpit. You have the armpit one. We're great here with our shoulders and elbow placement. It's just that this hand, because this elbow got so high, as the elbow gets like higher than maybe ear height, right? And you're getting it to mid-head height. Once we get into that zone there, it's going to start to force this hand to come in closer to our body. See that? How that hand just got closer to the body. And now that it's this close to the body, when the hand does flip up, and in your case, also the elbow flip down, we're not going to be in that 90-90 because that hand was getting closer to the head that whole time. So once this elbow gets higher than this, the hand is going to get closer. Boom. And now that the hand got closer, when we go into the flip, it's going to continue to go closer. And that's why we're not in our 90-90. And that's why instead of trying to think about cleaning this up, which is a lot to think about, it's going to be easier to try to clean this up. And if we can try to get these elbows to work together in the same bend for longer, this elbow is not going to have the ability to get as far back as it does. Because you can get one elbow super far back if the other elbow does not go back. We can load one scap a lot if the other scap does not load. We can pinch one shoulder blade back a lot if the other shoulder blade does not pinch. But we pinch both shoulder blades together equally. They touch each other. Our shoulder blades pinch eventually, and they can't go any further. But because you only pinching one and not the other, it can go so far back. So we get this glove side to mimic this, and this won't be able to get as high because those shoulder blades will both be pinching sooner. But because this one's not going back, this one can keep pinching and not run into the other one until here. But this one starts to pinch as well, and boom, it stops right here. Because other than that, everything that you do is really good. Flows good, finishes pretty well, comes through with a nice sturdy head on the target, relatively repeatable. It's just we want these things to flow together. And who knows, maybe when we don't extend this with a straight arm, this becomes easier not to extend straight as well. Because, like we said, our body wants to flow, whether that's the back side flowing with the front side, or it's the lower half front side and the upper half front side wanting to flow together. You're going to have things that want to work together and sync up with one another. And when you're good with that sync here, but then we can see we get out of that sync here, who knows, maybe just a sole focus on this will help clean up this without having to think about it. But really, we need to overall just think about front leg, not extending and trying to reach as far as we are, but just drive it into the ground. And then think about having our elbow flexion in the glove side match this side, so that way when these would ultimately come back, they meet here and can't go any further. But if this side does not go back, this side will be able to keep going until it gets in line with this. And by that time, we're in danger zone, because danger zone is this tight angle here.